Words About Books is a poorly spoken podcast where once a month we discuss one particular book in detail. And since we already blew this month on Edenverse, Ben wants to take this opportunity to talk about Dune again, ahead of us reading Dune Messiah later this year.
I'm going to title this episode, The World is Terrible, so Ben talks about Dune again.
Okay. Oh yeah, I'm Nate. That's all right. So Ben, why do you want to make the world a worse place by talking about Dune?
I don't want to make the world a worse place by talking about Dune. I wanted to make myself...
Do you want to distract us from the fact that there is an attempted coup earlier?
Yeah. Well, by the time this goes out, Biden should be in the White House. I don't... Boy...
A little too early to...
Yeah, I was going to say...
too early to tell.
Knocking on wood, I guess. I hope. Maybe there won't even be a country. I don't know. I didn't actually want to do this episode or plan to do this episode. This actually sort of comes out of my own personal reading. I read Chapter House Dune, which I had not yet read when we did the Dune episodes. And immediately after reading Chapter House Dune, I wanted to read the next book. But as we mentioned in Dune, Frank Herbert, the author of the original Dune series, died after writing Chapter House Dune, which ends on a cliffhanger. I'm going to try not to get too much into spoilers with this. I'll let you know when we're getting there, and I'll try to keep it towards the end. But I'd heard mixed things about the books that continued the Dune series. So for anyone who didn't listen to our Dune episodes, essentially what happened, Frank Herbert wrote this legendary sci-fi epic, and he died somewhat suddenly, and he didn't get a chance to finish it. So nothing really happened with Dune for about a decade after that. Brian Herbert, his son, inherited the estate and I guess the control over who could use the Dune material, who could write Dune novels, and he initially did not want to continue it. The Chapter House Dune novel ends with a dedication by Frank Herbert to his late wife, who died during the writing of the book, and it was kind of a really nice, really touching note to end on. She had helped him with all of those books, and I guess Brian Herbert for a long time just thought, you can't do Dune without Frank Herbert. And I've watched a few interviews with Brian Herbert, and I guess what changed his mind about that was meeting his co-author, Kevin J. Anderson. I have never read anything else by either Brian Herbert or Kevin J. Anderson. I don't know what their other books are like, so I don't want to say too much about them. I know Kevin J. Anderson has written pretty prolifically. He's written novels in the Star Wars universe. I think he might have written novels for like the Blizzard games even. I think he might have had a StarCraft novel, actually.
Yeah, I see Star Wars, StarCraft, The X-Files, Titan AE.
Yeah. So he's kind of like he does have his own work, but he's also kind of like a writer for hire. And when they met, I guess they got to talking and they had a bunch of ideas for Dune books. Brian Herbert had initially been planning to write sort of a prequel trilogy to Dune with his father before his father died. So I guess they'd had multiple conversations about what those books would be like, what story elements they would borrow from the original series and expand upon. And that was sort of in the works when Frank Herbert passed away. So multiple people had approached Brian Herbert about doing a continuation to Dune, but for whatever reason, Kevin J. Anderson was the one to convince him that they had a path forward. Basically, what I understand is their goal was to finish the cliffhanger that Chapter House Dune had ended on. But in order to do that, they felt it necessary to also write a prequel trilogy and to remind, and I quote, the book-buying audience, end quote, that Dune existed.
This is a good start.
Most Dune readers do not make it to Chapter House. I think a lot of people have read the first Dune and maybe read it multiple times even, but...
I can't believe that. Okay. First of all, it would take more than one human lifetime to read that book twice. And second of all, is it the worm guy that turns most people off?
Dune is an interesting series in that Frank Herbert builds up a hero's journey narrative and then he deconstructs it. And I think a lot of people hopped off the train at the initial deconstruction. They didn't like seeing the hero get taken down.
Or they hopped off the train at the original hero's journey and then complained about how it's a white savior novel.
Some people do.
Yeah, and then those people are on Twitter.
That's a different conversation. That's too much to get into right now. But for whatever reason, Dune is long. It's kind of dry. And it gets weirder as it goes on. And I don't blame anybody for hopping off at any given point. So Chapter House is the 6th book in the series, and
oh my god.
Like with any series, I mean, like with any series of episodes in a podcast, you're going to have people who are with you to try it out for the first one. You're going to lose people at the sequel, and you're just going to keep losing people as things go on.
I feel that, Ben.
I said this in our first episode. It's not really thought of as a series that is one complete story that you have to read every book to get. Like, most people think of Lord of the Rings as a trilogy. Nobody just reads Fellowship of the Ring. You gotta read the whole thing. People do just read Dune, and they don't go on to Dune Messiah. It had also been a lot of time since there had been any real marketing around Dune. The David Lynch movie was in the past.
You remember that time when he spit directly on Jessica's face?
I know you'll never forget it. Oh, we never plugged that. We never plugged our Dune riff track.
Well, now's the perfect time to do it.
Yeah, if you want to check out Words About Books YouTube channel, we've got our own commentary track for the 1984 David Lynch Dune movie. I will post a link to it on Twitter. But yeah, so they decided they needed to first build some hype around Dune. They decided to write the prequel trilogies first. I think that was a mistake. I don't know why. But they thought that writing book 7 of a 6-book series now would, for whatever reason, not sell well. I don't know.
So they decided to write House Atreides and House Carino and House Harkonnen first?
Yes.
Okay.
To build hype. Because that would be
build hype.
Well, that would be a good jumping on point, they thought, for new readers of Dune. It would be a brand new story that you could start from the beginning.
Okay. I think that maybe new readers would just read the books that already exist.
I agree, but like I said, for not the choice I would have made, but at this point, I'm going to say these guys have sold more books than I ever will, so I'll defer to their expertise on that.
Okay. Now, have they sold more books in an original medium?
Yeah. Than I ever will? Yeah.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah, I mean, they do
They
have
also use their names.
Yeah, they have their own original novels. They actually have their own original series together. It's like the Hellhole trilogy or something.
The Hellhole. Okay, I'm going to look this up. On the dangerous frontier planet Hellhole, defeated and exiled rebel General Tiber Adolphus continues his honorable opposition to the political scheming and selfish machinations of the crown jewel worlds and grandmotherly diadem Michella. So he saw the names in Dune and we're like, I can do that too. Adolphus and his companions work in secret to undermine the royal space travel monopoly. Okay. And form a coalition of deep zone planets. Diadem Michella. And embroiled in the schemes of the ancient noble families on the decadent capital planet, Sanjira is too distracted to recognize the danger Adolphus poses.
I do see a certain influence.
Yeah, I'm getting some major Dune vibes for some reason here.
Look, they just have a spacing guild and chome and noble houses and
Oh boy!
I didn't actually know anything about this.
And they named the planet Hellhole. I thought this was gonna be some edgy thing. No, this is
moving on.
Sad.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, go on.
So it's taken me a while to get to this point. During the course of writing those prequel trilogies, I think even planning the prequel trilogies, an estate attorney called up Brian Herbert and said, "Hey, we found 2 safe deposit boxes in your dad's name." And when he went to look, there were a bunch of documents in those safe deposit boxes. And among the documents, there was a floppy disk labeled Dune 7. And it contained the complete outline for Dune 7 and notes and a bunch of other blanks that were left in the stories, like who Jessica's mother was, things like that.
That's important.
Those were all.
I need to know who Jessica's mother was, even though she's dead. She's been dead for thousands of years by that point, right?
I'm just gonna say this. 3 guesses. Who do you think Jessica's mother was?
Is it gonna be Gaia Mahimheim Helen?
Gaius Helen Mohiam? Yeah.
Oh my God. The only other woman of note.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it contained little tidbits like that.
We need to know.
The casual reader wouldn't pick up on. And with that, they had their blueprint for the final Dune novel. Well, the final of Frank Herbert's Dune novels.
And they're like, yeah, we can do this. We have 3 novels under our belt already that everyone loves, I'm sure.
No, they didn't at this point. This was before the release of those novels. They were in the planning stages of those novels when he found this.
Okay.
But they still decided to go ahead with the prequels.
Yeah, if they've already done all that work on it. I need to know who Jessica's mom is. I need to know all about House Carino. Even though, Ben, does House Carino still exist after the first Dune novel?
No,
okay.
But, well, Nate, so the prequel trilogy deals with the events of the Butlerian Jihad.
Okay, so I've read sci-fi where it's robots versus people.
Yeah, so it's robots versus people.
Okay, woohoo!
I haven't read it. I don't know. So they wrote those 3 books. I haven't read them. Then they, looking at Frank Herbert's outline, decided to split Dune 7 into 2 novels. First mistake.
Was there a financial motive behind this? I'm sure we'll never know.
I don't think so. We'll get to that stuff. I just want to get the events, like the timeline out of the way.
Okay, so that's Hunters of Dune and Sandworms of Dune?
Yes. And those 2 books conclude what I think are called the Dune Chronicles, which is it includes Frank Herbert's original 6 books plus those 2, the end. That's the end of Frank Herbert's arc.
Okay, but there's also another 10 Dune books.
Yeah, they're all in a different little series.
Okay.
So, that's how we came to have Hunters of Dune and Sandworms of Dune. Now, it is important to know that long before anything was published, people hated this idea. They didn't want these. There was a huge section of the Dune fan base that was totally against anyone other than Frank Herbert writing Dune. And I guess what we're really going to tackle in this episode is
if Kevin J. Anderson should go ahead and write the other 2 Game of Thrones books.
No, I'm going to tackle a broader question. Should another author finish an author's series? No.
Well, all right, everyone.
Thank you for attending my TED Talk. I'm
Next month we're doing Twilight.
yeah, no. I do have a little bit more to say, but yeah, no. In broad terms, I do not feel that is ever a good idea. I know people are going to say the Wheel of Time. I know everybody loves the way Brandon Sanderson finished that. That's fine. It's the exception, not the rule. But yeah, so the books came out and they were met with, I'm going to say, mixed reception. There's a group of people that is vehemently against these books, and another group of people it's like, hey, they're okay. I don't think there's anybody who, like, these are their favorite books, but there are people who enjoy them for what they are. I'm somewhere in the middle, truth be told. I want to address some of the criticisms of Frank Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson that I think are unfair. As I was researching for this, reading reviews online, reading posts from old Dune forums, I read things like Brian Herbert was doing this to spite his dad, that Brian Herbert never liked his dad, and
what?
Like a cynical cash grab. Yeah.
My plan to destroy my father's work is to do it worse. That'll show him.
I think there were people who were just accusing Brian Herbert of just not liking his dad and trying to finish the books as somebody who didn't understand the man who wrote them. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's true. I think he and his dad had a good relationship, especially as adults. Brian Herbert himself has mentioned that as a child and a teenager, he had disagreements with his dad. He wasn't sure he liked his dad, but again, he was a teenager. That seems like angst. And he mentioned as adults, they got along very well. And I have no doubt in my mind that Frank Herbert was indeed planning on co-authoring Dune prequels with his son. And I don't even think that would have necessarily been a bad project, because the prequels are so far separated from Dune in terms of time, history, culture, everything. It doesn't really bother me as much for them to have a totally different vibe. I think that's more where Brian Herbert could have actually really used his own voice.
They could have introduced a character that's like a fish man. He's a comedy guy. He steps in the poop.
There are fishmen.
Okay.
There are,
all right.
There are fishmen and catmen.
Okay.
Pretty sure that was Frank Herbert's idea. I'm going to say that Brian Herbert didn't do that.
Hey, man. We all have our own, like, kinks. It's cool.
There's also accusations that this was a cynical cash grab, and I don't necessarily think that's true either. I don't think it was cynical. Certainly they wanted it to be profitable. There were many decisions made based around the idea of what would be marketable to a mainstream audience, but it doesn't strike me as Brian Herbert was running out of cash and needed to like leverage his dad's legacy to make a quick buck. I think he was doing okay. I think he really thought, whatever his conversations with Kevin J. Anderson were, I think he thought he got what he needed to finally make this project work. I have no idea what that was.
Hey, I've written about 400 novels, man. I can write for you too. All right, sold.
The way they described it in an interview was he met Kevin J. Anderson and they started talking about ideas for Dune, and I guess the conversations were so good and like maybe the two of them just worked so well together that he thought like, yeah, we could do this. We're getting a lot of good ideas here. We could do this. And they went from there.
Well, yeah, let's start talking about that book then. How'd those amazing ideas translate to the page, Ben? It sounds like that you are just ready to talk about how you love this book, how it did, not only did it do justice to the original series, but it has surpassed the original series. this is definitely the best of these 7 Dune books that you've read so far. Is that the vibe that I'm getting here?
I was trying to say a lot of nice things before I said some mean things. Because, no, I did not like this book. I'm
shocked.
I don't want to say anything that's unfounded or just speculation. I watched an interview with Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson, who I'm just going to call KJA.
KJ.
I'm going to call him Kevin. I'm going to call him Kevin for expediency.
KJ.
I watched an interview with the two of them. They said that early on they made a choice to not try to mimic Frank Herbert's style. That his style of writing was not how they like to write. They viewed things more cinematically, his words, and I think those are appropriate words. And whereas Frank Herbert was kind of like, he literally would tell you, like, such and such important character died off screen. We're moving on now.
Fade Routha. Step forward for the duel of the fates.
Well, like, just to give you an idea, like, between Dune 1 and Dune 2, 10 years pass. Between Dune 2 and Dune 3, like, another 10 years pass. And then between Dune 3 and Dune 4, 2,500 years pass.
Nice.
So, like, Frank Herbert just skips. He skips to what interests him. He doesn't.
So what we need, what you're saying is we need, like, a 5-book series between Dune 3 and Dune 4 to explain what happened in those 2,500 years.
I'm pretty sure they wrote
Oh, God. So they didn't want to mimic the writing style, which, as we discussed in Dune, the actual book, that was the only thing I really even liked about that book.
So in their defense, I do want to say something. Is you had criticisms about the first book related to style of there's so much boring talk going on.
What, you didn't like the part where there was a traitor amongst them and, like, everyone had to figure that out slowly over the course of 250 pages?
I remember you commenting, though, on how the entire invasion of Arrakis happens off screen.
Yeah, that's true.
How you didn't like that. How you would have liked to see that.
Yeah, you know what? Have Kevin rewrite the first Dune.
No. Kevin doesn't want to do that, and no, I don't want him to do that. No. But that is a legit criticism of Frank Herbert, is that's why these books are so dry, because he doesn't indulge you in the payoff like normal fiction books do. His books aren't exciting. They're not vivid and descriptive. And
the worms attacking the Baron and the Emperor, that also happens off screen.
Yeah.
So they need to add some laser swords and some Sith power in there, and that's how we're going to save the Dune books.
Well, buckle up.
Oh boy. All right.
So, in my opinion, this was a big mistake. Well, I think that is a legit
style, is what you're saying.
I think,
since I interrupted so many times, you think
it is a legitimate criticism of Frank Herbert to say that he could have written more descriptively. He could have been a little bit more cinematic. He could have paid off his plot points better than he did. Unfortunately, he's not a man who organized his thoughts that way. Dune was already a very long book. So long it couldn't be published by most publishers. And fleshing out those scenes would have added length to the book, and Frank Herbert wasn't really even interested in those scenes. So he didn't bother with them. And if you're going to work off Frank Herbert's outline, where he likes to tell these stories with 10-year time skips, and like sometimes within the same book there's 10-year time skips, and a lot of stuff happens off screen because he's dealing with, like, there's just so many events going on in his books. You can't take an outline written in that frame of mind and then try to apply a cinematic writing style where each scene logically flows into the next scene, or you're going to wind up with 2 600-page long books where nothing happens, which is what they did. That's my probably main criticism of this book is why in God's name this was split into 2 books. I will never know. There's not enough material in here for it to have made 2 interesting books. This book is entirely set up for the next book, but it's 600 pages of setup, and it's padded. Like,
I thought, okay, hold on, back up. I thought we had all learned our lesson after the first Dune and realized that 600 pages, maybe not the best idea. Maybe cut that shit down a bit.
Some of the Dune books creep back up towards 500.
Oh, no.
But most of them don't. To be honest, most of them do come in shorter. I think God Emperor... Let me look. I got it in front of me. I always have a copy of... Well, I got Heretics of Dune in front of me.
What the fuck is this note about an obese woman?
We'll get to that.
Oh my god.
Heretics of Dune is 667 pages.
Oh no.
Let me take a look. God Emperor Dune. 586.
You really fucked up, Frank. You dick.
Okay, so that's the biggest problem. But it's not the only problem with Kevin J. Anderson and Brian Herbert's writing. Their other problem is, I hate to say they don't get Dune, because obviously they have had more access to Frank Herbert, more access to Frank Herbert's materials than I ever will. But Frank Herbert's stories are weird, and they're not great. Like, the best part about Dune wasn't the narrative of the noble houses fighting each other. That wasn't actually that good. It was kind of confusing nonsense. And the best part was the subtle observations that kept me going. Like, for some reason, I was listening to a programming book the other day. I was listening to an audiobook called The Practical Programmer, for anybody who's wondering. And they talk about terminology and jargon they're going to use in the book. And I remembered one of Frank Herbert's writings about the Bene Gesserit having a rule against jargon, because jargon leads to a lack of true understanding or thinking about the concepts you're talking about. It's like, do not let your people fall into jargon, because then they'll just be saying meaningless words like synergy, everyone agreeing, and nobody really understanding what the hell they're talking about. And I love that. I feel that so hard in my soul, especially in the tech world. I hate jargon. And there's just so many other things that pop up with that. Whenever I'm paying attention to politics or reading those Trump books or anything, like, little bits of Frank Herbert pop into my head, like little things the God Emperor would say to people. And there's just so many little quotable moments.
I never lost the election.
There's just none of that in this book. It's just played as like a straight sci-fi story about like sex ninjas and sandworms, and when you don't
Is that a
have
euphemism?
No. When you don't have anything deeper, Frank Herbert used his stories to talk about our world. And that is what Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson don't seem to get. Is Dune is not about a civilization 10,000 years in the future fighting over drugs in a desert. It's about our civilization. It's about colonization and oil and charismatic leaders. It's about government and Democrats and Republicans and the UN and bureaucracy. He's trying to say something about our world that he wants us to know. And I don't think Kevin Anderson and Brian Herbert have anything to say on those topics. So they're leaning so hard into the lore of Dune, which is stupid, to be quite frank, and it just sucks. I'm sorry, it's just a really bad book. And I wanted to like it. I was ready to like this. I was ready to be like, okay, it's not him, but I'll give it a chance. And there's just nothing for me to like sink my brain into. It's just dumb sci-fi bullshit happening. There's ships that fight with lasers. In a Dune book, there's dogfights in space. I hate it.
Hey, dogfights in space? That's great. I always wanted space battles in Dune. Are they in X-Wings?
Kind of, yeah. At this point, they get like ships, like Star Wars. It's like Dune influenced Star Wars, and now Star Wars is influencing Dune, and I hate it. I did not read their prequels. I will not read their prequels, but I think the prequels could have been okay.
We're not going to read the prequels for this podcast?
No, this is the spoiler here. We're not reading this book on the book club. If we ever do read all the Dune books, we are stopping at Chapter House. I do not think Sandworms of Dune is worth reading.
No, you haven't read Sandworms of Dune.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't think Hunters of Dune is worth reading. Because I don't really care how this story ends. That's the thing. Without Frank Herbert, it was never about the story. It was about it was about his voice and what he had to say about the world. And absent his voice and his message, the story doesn't matter. This isn't Lord of the Rings, where like Tolkien despised allegory. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings is very much a story that is meant to be taken by itself. It is a true narrative. I don't think Frank Herbert ever wrote that way. Everything he says, like all the most quoted things in Dune, you can crop out of that book and nobody would know he was talking about a sci-fi world. It all applies to our world right now, and that is what is the best thing about it. I'm going to move on from that point, though, because I've got one more point. And this is more of I don't want to say it's a bad faith criticism, but I am going to call out. The writing isn't good, and it's a co-authored book. I don't know who's to blame for that. But you mentioned, why do I have a note about an obese woman?
Yeah, I'm reading through your notes here, and there's a weird thing about an obese woman that maybe she's obese to catch you off guard.
Here's the thing. In Chapter House Dune and Heretics of Dune, there is a character, Belanda, who is a Bene Gesserit Mentat. She's overweight. It's mentioned that she's overweight. The reason they mention that is because Bene Gesserit can control their body chemistry and their metabolism. And the only reason for a Bene Gesserit to be overweight is because she wants to be overweight. Belanda didn't see fit to adjust her metabolism to anyone else's expectations. She didn't care how she looked.
Is it a secret cunning plan to catch people off guard?
It did lead people to underestimate her a little bit, but it wasn't really about that. It was more just about she didn't give a fuck. Also, I gotta point this out too, she wasn't like super fat.
Oh, because the way it's described, it sounds like she rolls around.
Right, it does. That's the thing. Like in the previous books, I got the vibe that she was overweight. She was a little chunky. Not that she was like 600 pounds. In this book, they never miss an opportunity to refer to how disgustingly fat this woman is. Every time she is mentioned in the book, they call her fat, and they do it in like the meanest way possible. And It doesn't stop there. The Bene Gesserit call the Honored Matres whores.
Yeah, I see that a lot in here.
Yeah. Now, there's a reason for that gets into spoilers. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I will say, in the previous books, one of the Bene Gesserit chooses to not call them whores because she doesn't think it's productive to understanding or moving the situation forward. That she needs to understand her enemy. She needs to think about why they are the way they are. And she pointedly does not call them whores. And so other people around her kind of stop doing that as well. Not in this book. In this book, that's all forgotten. If there is an opportunity to use the word whore, Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson will not pass it up. That is their favorite fucking word in the universe.
I think maybe it's because they think the word is fun to say. Like,
Yeah.
It's got a kind of oomph to it, you know.
Also, fold space. Do you know how Star Wars has hyperspace? Well, Dune has fold space now.
Ah, yes, I saw that. You go in one end and then you get spit out the other. I never thought that folding space itself was that important. It was how the spice worked into it.
Right. Don't get me wrong. This plot is bad. And that's another thing Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson have been accused of, is some of the things in this plot are really dumb. Really dumb. And they've been accused of adding these elements, that Frank Herbert wouldn't put these elements in. He would. I do believe that they may even know these elements are dumb, but they had to write them because they were in Frank's original outline. It doesn't help because Frank Herbert's thoughts and opinions are not there to elevate this text. So
What are Kevin's thoughts and opinions?
I don't think he has any.
Okay, but like, are his thoughts and opinions like Star Wars was fun, like pew pew, like lasers, fun?
Kind of. That's what I get from it. Like, it's just space battles. All the government thought, all the philosophy, it's all gone.
Yeah, because now we have Star Wars. Now we have cool space fights. We don't need the substance behind it.
They have a little bit of the plots within plots, but not much.
I thought that was like the entire thing of Frank Herbert.
Yeah.
But they didn't want to replicate his style. Do you think, you can cut this, do you think Kevin is, he doesn't see this as art, he sees this as a product? That's a lot of what I'm getting with the various reviews I'm reading, both for this book and for Hellhole. No, I didn't read any of this. So,
well, this is a big question. So, I don't know Kevin J. Anderson, and I haven't read his work. And I'm not particularly excited to read his work, if I'm honest. The vibe, I don't have a positive impression of him, if I'm honest. And the reason I say that, I watched an interview with the two of them, like I said. At one point in the interview, Brian Herbert mentions that he was going through his dad's notes and he compiled a big book of every important event and character and ability and basically just like a Dune encyclopedia of all the canon references to how everything worked. And he thought about publishing it. And he then says that Kevin told him, "No, don't publish that. The fans will use it to crucify us."
how and why?
Because I'm not ready to get into spoilers yet, so I'll try to say this without spoiling. There are lore mistakes in this book, which I can only assume are worse in their prequel books.
And they'll get crucified.
And fans have already called them out repeatedly for getting these things wrong. But like I said, Frank Herbert got a few of these things wrong in his own books himself. He retconned a few things.
Frank.
Yeah, he did.
Okay.
Like, we'll talk about that more in Dune Messiah, but there's a big one I still don't understand to this day that I think was just a retcon or a mistake.
Yeah, there's a girl who's a Kwisatz Haderach.
Yeah. So I...
Oh my god, this is brutal. Starts with, "Dear Brian Herbert, I'm writing to inform you that your writing sucks." And it just goes from there. Oh god.
I don't think these guys are that bad. I do get the impression that Kevin J. Anderson thinks he's definitely an artist who makes art to order. I don't know that makes him less of an artist, but he sees it definitely as a product. Like you said. He's concerned about marketability. He would not invest his time in writing a book that he did not think would sell. I don't know that that's a bad thing. But in the case of Dune, I don't know why he was chosen among all the people in the world who love Dune to be the guy to continue Dune. Because Frank Herbert is the opposite. He is a man who would invest years of his life writing a book no one would buy. That's how he famously started. And to hire a writer for hire type guy to write a bloated... It's a shame. I don't know what Brian Herbert sees in him. I have to say that. It's a harsh...
Well, I've speculated some sort of photograph or something he doesn't want to get out.
I do get the when you hear them talk, I do get the vibe they're friends, but I just don't know what ideas he brought to the table that were so revolutionary.
There's a really fat Bene Gesserit who's like a rotund blob monster. And like, wouldn't it be funny if she were fat? Ben.
They also make numerous references to their prequel books.
Well, yeah, you gotta sell the merch, baby.
Yeah.
Is it like in comic books, they say something, and then they put an asterisk, and then at the bottom of the page, and it's like, as seen in House Carino of Dune, page whatever, go buy it now.
It's literally like they say like, oh, this is just like what happened that time that Norma Senva was there. It's like, who the fuck's that? She's not in Dune. Oh, she's in the prequels. What I don't like about that is I find it very presumptuous to put your books on the same level as the original trilogy, or not the original trilogy, but as the original series. Like, you cannot just casually drop references to your prequels as if they are I guess I'm getting a little...
Wow.
I am saying
Jar
they're
Jar
not real
Binks.
Dune. I'm saying his books aren't real Dune, and I'm saying it was very presumptuous of him to finish his father's series with plugs for his own books. Before we get into spoilers, we're going to go through my notes for a little bit.
I need to say that I just got to highlight 23, note 23, quote, welcome back, note, oh boy, this is fucking awful. The fat Reverend Mother, note, look in a mirror, Kevin.
Check out highlight 34.
Okay, we're getting weird. Competing with each other to see who could be the most disgusting. An amazing repertoire of scatological talents. Made more revolting sounds and noxious odors than anyone Uxtal had ever encountered.
Check out highlight 36.
Ship armor, pseudo-atomics, laser guns, projectile launchers, micro-explosive, pulse cannons, blasters, poison dust, shard daggers, fletchet guns, disruptors, mine scramblers, offensive X-probes, hunter-seeker assassination tools, deceptives, energizers, burners, dart launchers, stun grenades, even genuine atomics. For display purposes only. So is this what you mean by bloated?
Anyone? You were probably the first person to ever read that whole thing.
You're right. I don't think that they read it, or else maybe they would have been like, we should probably cut this. The next one just says, this is garbage. One Warlord customer recently suffered from, an assassination. Therefore, his completed order remains unclaimed, and we can offer you all of it. I'll take it with me now, she said.
Are you ready to get into spoilers?
Yes.
Okay, so anybody who wants to read Hunters of Dune spoiler-free, turn off the podcast now, because I can't promise I'm going to ever go back. So, that was your last chance. All right. I'm going to tell you the point where I would have stopped reading the book if we weren't going to talk about it on this podcast. And that is, oh God, note 41, page 281.
Has she truly seen Leto transform into a sandworm? Oh my God. So what is this?
The main plot of Hunters of Dune is that everybody starts making golas of everything. They're just balls to the wall. The enemy's coming. The capital E enemy that we don't know what it is coming. And we're going to need all the great powers humanity can muster. So we're bringing back the Dream Team. Paul Atreides, Leto II, Thufir Howard for some reason. Dr. Yue.
Dr. What? What?
Jessica.
What the fuck? What?
Stilgar.
What?
Liet Kynes.
Oh, I need to turn down my boosting.
Shawnee.
What? Why? What? Liet Kynes?
Baron Vladimir Harkonnen.
What? Why? Why?
Paul again.
Okay. Why not?
There's two Pauls. There's an evil Paul named Paulo.
There's an evil Paul. Oh my god.
One of the goals they bring back is Leto II, right?
Okay.
And a lot of the Bene Gesserit are like vehemently against resurrecting Leto II.
Yeah, resurrecting a war criminal.
The God Emperor Tyrant, yeah.
The super war criminal.
Yeah. And they vote, and by a narrow margin, they vote to bring him back anyway, on Duncan Idaho's assurances that Leto II was not born evil. It was his circumstances that led to him choosing what he chose. So, they bring him back as a baby. And that's part of the reason why this book is so long, because every single one of these kids has to age up in real time. So this book is like 15 years span, and it
Can they seriously not just accelerate their growth?
No, it fucks them up.
Is that not a thing?
They do it with some of the Tleilax masters, and it fucks up their ability to get their memories back. So they have to grow naturally.
Oh joy. Okay.
So in previous books, that had happened, like with the Duncan Idaho Golas. And Frank Herbert would just skip ahead 10 years. He'd be like, okay, Duncan's 10 now. Like, Duncan's 15 now. But no, we got to watch every painful year. So.
Good. I want to know where they went to school. I want to know what grades they got.
On a spaceship,
I want to know
they all did pretty
who has
well.
a crush on who.
Paul has a crush on Shani. You think you're joking.
Oh, no. I was joking, Ben.
No, you think you're joking. No, Stilgar and Liet Kynes hang out.
Good.
They keep telling Yue, you got to restore your memories. And he's like, I don't want to restore my memories. My life sucked.
You need to restore your memories. Hey, remember that time where you betrayed and killed us? That was cool. Wait a minute. Is Leto the first here?
No, he was on the list,
What?
but he didn't make the cut.
Why?
Because
You're bringing back fucking Yue and Liet Kynes, two guys who didn't do shit.
I'll tell you what's weirder. They brought back Paul first, so Paul is a year older than Jessica.
That's really weird. Yeah.
Yeah. No, Leto didn't make the cut. I'm guessing because he never really did figure out how to evade a trap. So
Well, he knows that the trap is there, and that's enough.
No, that's that. They all know that the trap is there. They're not unaware of the trap. We're really focusing on avoiding this time. So, Baby Leto too. Some of the Bene Gesserit are like, you know what? I don't care that we voted democratically. I don't care that that's how the Bene Gesserit operate. I don't care that that's what makes us better than everybody else. We're going to take matters into our own hands.
Oh, good. That always works out really well for the Bene Gesserit.
We're going to smother this baby in the crib. So they sneak in. Shut up.
Okay.
They sneak in. Oh, dude. We're going to talk. You think Twilight's bad. Jesus Christ. So they decide to smother the baby in the crib. So they sneak in, and they're like going to smother him, right? They're about to put the pillow over his face. Baby Leto's looking at him like he knows what they're doing. And they start to smother him. And then all of a sudden, it goes into the narrative equivalent of shaky cam. Like, the pillow bursts apart, and something darts out and takes a chunk out of, like, the Bene Gesserit's rib cage.
I'm getting some head full of ghost vibes here.
And the other one who's watching is like, oh my god, there was a sandworm there.
What?
So, there are sandworms on the ship they're on. So here's what I thought had happened. I thought...
That he became a sandworm as a baby?
Shut up. I thought that he had called one of the sandworms to him. Like, I thought, using his prescience that he did have as a baby in the original books, he detected a threat and was able to summon a sandworms because the sandworms are him. Long story. But that's not what happened. No, baby Leto has the ability to turn into a wereworm.
And you didn't like this book, Ben?
That line I highlighted. Had she truly seen Leto transform into a sandworm? That is the line where I would have stopped my Dune journey forever.
You just put down the Kindle, turn it off.
I would have just walked
Get
away.
up
I would
and
have
just walk away.
walked out my front door and kept walking. That was awful. And I'm going to go so far as to say that if that it's still really not made clear in this book what the fuck that was. He only ever does it this one time, and they never see him do it again, and they do multiple like tests on him and determine that all his cells are 100% human. And they so you don't really know, like, but it seems that he literally became a wereworm. And if that was in Frank Herbert's original outline, it should not have been. That's fucking dumb. That's like, this is the other thing. They're starting to get mystical in a way that Dune never did before. Like, Dune always had prescience, and it always had, like, the Bene Gesserit really stretched the limits of believability, but most of their powers were a kind of mind over matter type deal that you sort of hear semi-plausible rumors about people who, like, train and meditate and do yoga really hard can, like, control their heart rate, blood pressure, things like that. So he just kind of extrapolated that to the extreme. But now people are, like, having memories of lives they have no biological connection to. They're having sandworm transformations. The Baron remembers Alia.
Good.
The Baron
Oh,
Gull.
did they revive her?
No. She was on the list. She didn't make the cut.
So how do you make the cut? How are they like, yeah, we need Yue,
So
like that guy,
I don't know why they brought back Yue. I'm guessing because...
so he could betray and kill someone?
I'm guessing because they knew he was a protagonist or an antagonist. I don't know. And I don't know why they brought back Yue. They justify bringing back Jessica by having her maybe be a vehicle for Paul and Leto to regain their memories. Regaining your memories is complicated. It's a little bit different for everyone. You have to undergo some kind of trauma plus a reminder of your original life. They've done it before by pushing someone to a psychological limit or by reminding them of the way they died. So Jessica could play a role in reminding them of their previous life. So that's why they bring her back. I don't know why they brought Yue back. I can't even begin to fathom. They bring Liet Kynes back because at this point, Dune has been destroyed. There are only a handful of sandworms left.
And they need to remind him of the fact that his beloved planet is gone.
No, they might need him to help them start spice production again. That's their logic for that, is that he's the one who best understood the sandworms. Other than Leto, which...
What? How do they not know this? Like...
Oh, boy, dude. There are...
I'm telling you right now, if we had the ability to bring back a dead person from, like, 6,000 years ago to get his opinion on science...
Well, it's science of this one specific planet that... Okay, how they don't know this, the God Emperor didn't let them know this. There's really only... the only people left who really understand the spice cycle were Leto 2 and the people who figured it out before Leto 2. There haven't, like, the sandworms just came back relatively recently with Leto's death, and they haven't really stabilized for very long. So the human civilization had kind of a big reset, but you know how that like things were always intelligent, and I need to find my highlight here.
Oh, I thought you were just breaking down.
No, there's
You know how things used to be intelligent? Oh, God.
there's a specific passage I want to read to you that just really highlighted for me. This is something Frank Herbert never would have written. Like, I think what I liked most about Frank Herbert is sometimes he was hard to understand or follow. He didn't disrespect his audience. Like, he wanted you to read his book twice. If you didn't get it, read it again. If you don't get that reference, go look it up. These guys treat their audience like stupid babies.
Hey, I saw that as one of the criticisms.
Yeah. So here's what it is. Here's a little subtext for you. They're encountering a world where the Honored Matres used to live. Now, the Honored Matres were primarily interested in the Bene Gesserit for their ability to control their cells and their immune systems. So Bene Gesserit don't get sick, they don't get poisoned, they can adjust their metabolism to whatever they need. So, here's the passage. Garimi held up one finger. The horrors came to the Bene Gesserit demanding to know how we control our bodies. They were frantic to understand how Reverend Mothers can manipulate our immune functions, cell by cell. Speak clearly, Garimi. What do you mean? Teg's voice was abrupt. The battle-hardened commander. She turned a sour look on him. You're a mentat. Make a prime projection. Teg did not bristle at the scolding. Instead, his eyes became glazed for a moment, and then his expression returned. Ah, if the horrors wanted to learn how to control immune responses, then perhaps the enemy attacked them using a biological agent, and the horrors did not have the skills or the medical science to make them impervious. Therefore, they wanted to learn the secrets of the Bene Gesserit.
Okay. All right. Thanks for letting me know. I'm glad you spelled it out for me.
It took a mentat. Trained to perfection. Training his mind to the perfection of a human computer to predict that if the Honored Matres came, seeking immunity from disease, they may have feared disease. I was like, what the fuck? What the fuck is this?
What is this last highlight? Count Fenring had stabbed him. An assassination attempt that would place the daughter of Fade Routha and Lady Fenring on the new throne. Paul had very nearly died then, and your note just says, please stop. And that's your last note.
Okay. So,
Who even is the enemy? Do they even say who that is in this book?
At the very, very, very end, they tell you who the enemy is. Yes.
So this really is just 600 pages of building up.
But let me tell you, what kills me is at one point, there are not aliens in Dune. There have never been aliens in Dune.
Not yet, anyway.
There still aren't.
Until we get to Aliens of Dune.
So there's no intelligent life in the universe other than humans, as far as they know. So people start returning from the scattering, and they're scared of something. And at one point he slips up. About halfway through the book, they're fighting the enemy. They have no idea what the enemy is, who the enemy is, what they're capable of. And at one point, one of the Bene Gesserit Mother Commander says that she is going to protect all of human civilization, which is your first confirmation that she suspects that the enemy is non-human. The enemy is, in fact, the original thinking machine from the Butlerian Jihad that escaped Earth, shot himself randomly into space, managed to land on a planet way out in the middle of fucking nowhere, and he's been rebuilding himself ever since. And the Honored Matres stumbled across him and attacked him.
Oh, well, okay. That may not have been the best idea.
They didn't know what he was. The Honored Matres had been gone for so long that they forgot all about the Butlerian Jihad. And they attacked him, and now he's coming to finish off humanity. He's done.
Okay.
It makes numerous references to the prequels, which I don't believe. This is where I will say I don't believe.
I didn't realize, Ben, there were 6 prequels prior to this.
Aye.
Yeah, it looks like they did that. The 3 houses, but then they also did the Butlerian Jihad, the Machine Crusade, the Battle of Corin, and then they released Hunters of Dune.
Yeah, and they make copious references to the other prequel books throughout this book, and it just serves to clash more.
Did they bring any of the prequel characters back as Golas? Golas?
And no.
Okay.
They shoehorned them in. So in the original, I've read a blog post by Kevin J. Anderson where people thought the notion of bringing all the main characters back as Golas was stupid and a giant step backward for the series, literally, which it is, unfortunately. Sorry, Frank. Kevin pointed out that that was something Frank Herbert was originally thinking about doing. There were hints of it in Chapter House Dune. On that...
Now, when they say... Okay, sorry, finish your thought. I need to
On
stop
that, I agree with
you.
Kevin 100%, that the Gola plot was where Frank Herbert was going. It's still bad.
Yeah, so I guess my thing is, did they ever say how far along they thought this outline was? Like, was it like his first outline, like he scribbled it on a napkin real quick and he hadn't had time to refine it, and they were like, yeah, this must be what he wanted. Let's go for it.
It was on a floppy disk labeled Dune 7. And yeah, that's it. That's all I know. I do know that Brian Herbert didn't think his dad worked from outlines, that wasn't something Frank Herbert normally did. And so it surprised him. Like, I guess Kevin Anderson asked him, do you have any materials from your dad's notes or anything? And he said, my dad didn't do copious notes. He didn't do outlines. He just sort of...
And then it's going to come out on that estate lawyer's deathbed that he made it all up.
No,
he really just wanted Dune books to finish the series, and he was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna try and write what I think it is.
So I should tell you, because that is a rumor. Like, that is the rumor is that he made it up. I don't think he did. And I think Kevin J. Anderson makes a good point in one of his blog posts that there are hints in the text of Chapter House Dune that these Golas were going to get made. There is, like, the cells that are necessary to create the Gola are present in Chapter House Dune. That plot is foreshadowed, for sure. That's where he was going. They did not make that up. He was going to bring Paul back. He was going to bring Leto 2 back. In Chapter House Dune, there's a Bene Tleilax who is mentioned as having cells from a bunch of historical figures, including Muad'Dib, the God Emperor, Jessica, Baron, all the characters from the original Dune. What's not mentioned until Hunters of Dune is that also he has cells from Serena Butler and the Psymech warlords and
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, the Psymechs are they're cyborg mechanism guys.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Yeah, they turn themselves into computers? I don't know. I didn't read the prequels.
Well, there's your problem. Okay, so would you have gotten more out of Hunters of Dune had you gone back and read those other 6 books?
I wouldn't have read Hunters of Dune had I read one of those other 6 books. That is safe to say. I do not like the way these guys write. This is not for me.
Are you intending on reading Sandworms of Dune to close out the Dune saga?
Nate, I have a confession to make. I had intended for this episode to have read the full conclusion of Dune. I had planned back in mid-December when I started reading this. I normally, like, the other Dune books, as long as they are, it took me like a week to read them. I love those books. This book took me until 3 a.m. last night to finish because I had to make myself finish it. And
now you know how I feel.
And I fell asleep no less than 6 times.
Oh my God.
Reading this book.
Oh, wow.
My wife was like, she literally asked me, she's like, I thought you were sick. Why are you napping so much? I was like, I'm trying to get through hearing that Marbella was an honored matre turned Bene Gesserit for the 16th goddamn time in a fucking single book. Every time a character is mentioned, they're reintroduced. As if...
What?
I don't know how many times I need to hear that Miles Tegg is a Mentat Bashar reborn in a Gola body. They mention it 16 times.
What is going on?
There's a lot going on. Like, okay, here's an example you'll know. I don't need to hear over and over that Paul and Chani were in love in a previous life. I know that.
Do. What if you forgot?
Then you need to go back and reread Dune. Like, if you forgot
that was like 50 years before this book came out. What if you forgot the first Dune somehow?
Then by the time you got to the point where they mention it again, you've already forgotten what you just read because you're a moron.
Well, that's why they're reintroducing them, Ben.
It's a 600-page book. I know it is such a cliche of this podcast to say, cut it, cut. But my God, you know what? I didn't say that about Frank Herbert's other books. Frank Herbert's other books were self-indulgent as fuck, and I lived for it. I loved that man. I could listen to that man Can you imagine Frank Herbert with a Facebook? I could read that man's Facebook rants day and night for the rest of my life. That would make me so happy.
But he doesn't have any pew-pew lasers, and he doesn't have a guild fleet coming out of nowhere to save the day at the very end.
I wanted to, I'm gonna end this episode with where I started this episode. I wanted to like this book. I didn't care if it was as good as Frank Herbert. I knew it would be different. I thought I could stomach the Star Wars expanded universification of Dune. I can't.
It sounds like this book was a chore to read. Sounds like without the original author behind it, Dune is just not Dune. It's like Star Wars Dune or something. And like, what the fuck are we doing here?
I don't know. I think my conclusion is my final thoughts are, if you're going to try to finish another author's work, your writing style should be very similar to that author's, and ideally you should have spoken to that author about doing it. Like, I know George R. R. Martin in one interview once said if in the very specific circumstance where he found out he had a terminal illness and he had some time before he died, he might try to sit down with somebody and talk about how to finish. Other than that, though, he has said, like, his estate has made explicit, no one finishes those books if he dies. And I think that's the correct choice. I think, if Dune...
Well, we already saw what happened to his story when someone else tries to complete it.
Yeah.
It's fucking garbage.
I think there's, eventually things fade into mythos, like King Arthur. I'm a big fan of Arthurian tales, and someday we'll do that on the podcast. But there's multiple versions of them. Some of them share canon, some of them don't. People like King Arthur, all the legendary King Arthur tales are basically just fan fiction of some original tale that we don't have. And I think eventually, as things like Dune enter the public domain, eventually things like that will take place, where these characters can become sort of our common mythology, and we can play with them like we play with Greek myth or Arthur or any of the other common human symbols. But I think sometimes a story just needs to be left unfinished. Like, nobody's coming back to finish the Canterbury Tales.
Damn it, why not? It's in the you know what? It's in the public domain. You want to do it?
No. I was just about to say, the Canterbury Tales aren't hurting for it. They've stood the test of time. Fucking needed to be translated from English to English, but they stood the test of time. So I think I would rather Chapter House be the last book in the Dune series, and I think I didn't want to be this guy. I didn't want to recommend people stop reading there, but I would say I put it this.
Do that. Do stop reading there.
Yeah.
All right, what are we doing next week, which is also next month, February?
Next month, we are doing Twilight Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer.
And Kevin J. Anderson.
Dude, that'd be fucking sweet. Oh my god, I would pay so much money for that crossover.
So that's next month, and then plug the Twitter and all that, and let's get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, real quick this time. You can follow us on Twitter at WABpod. That is the best way to stay up to date on what we're reading. I'm going to be posting the book club books there, as well as any other books we might be covering throughout the year. We're going to be doing short stories here soon, too, so I'll be posting there. I'll try to post at least a month in advance of any short story we choose to do so that you can catch up. We have a Goodreads group, Words About Books podcast. If you want to follow us there, you check out our own writing at poorlywritten.ninja. You can check out our additional show notes and commentary, which I promise I will update again soon. I kind of got lost in the holidays at blog.wordsaboutbooks.ninja. And with that, check out our YouTube channel. We got Words About Books YouTube channel where we've got a fun Dune and we've got a lot of Dune content. Only Dune content on our YouTube channel. We've got a fun little Dune animation, and we've got a Dune movie commentary track for you to listen to.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.